Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Morning.
Good morning.
And welcome. Good morning to all the members of the media, all our partners who are gathered here today. We're happy to have you all in our presence, and of course, with such an emergency and such a crisis on our hands, we thought it important to gather all of us here with the Samaritan movement to move forward as we look for solutions and to really announce that the future of our nation is at stake. But before we begin officially, I'd like to invite His Grace to open us up with a prayer and some brief remarks. Your Grace, I hand it over to you.
In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit.
Amen.
Father, we pray for the children of our nation, for their parents, their teachers, their caregivers, their grandmothers and grandfathers. We pray for our policy makers. We pray for our nation, that we may come together to ensure the safety of all of our children, their adequate development, and the conditions required for them to flourish and be happy and be able to have exceptional childhoods. We ask, Lord, that as we listen today, that you may grant us an open ear and heart, that we may think of the good of our children, and that we may allow all that you ask to lead us to a nation that is disciplined, where every child is given the space to grow and develop to their full potential, and where we, as the adults, are ready to do our part for our children. Amen.
Amen. In the name of the Father, Son, and the Spirit. Amen.
Good morning, and thank you once again for joining us here. We are here today because something is deeply wrong, and we can no longer afford to whisper about it. My name is Darian Narayan, and I'm the General Manager over at the Samaritan movement, and the Roman Catholic Church has taken it upon itself, under the guidance of His Grace, to move forward in a direction which looks at resolving the issues that we're seeing around mental health, especially amongst our children. We're seeing high levels of self-harm, we're seeing high levels of suicidality, and it can no longer be ignored. Across our nation, and especially among our children and young people, we're witnessing a quiet, devastating emergency. Suicide, self-harm, anxiety, depression, trauma, these are no longer rare or isolated experiences. They are becoming common stories in our homes, our schools, our churches, and our communities. Children are hurting in ways they do not yet have the language to explain. Some are carrying grief they never processed. Others are living with fear, instability, bullying, abuse, or the pressure to perform in a world that feels increasingly unsafe and unforgiving. And far too often, they're suffering in silence until that silence becomes fatal. Let us be clear. When a child harms themselves, it is not a failure of that child. It is a failure of the system. It is a failure of the support. It is a failure of society to notice, to listen, and to intervene early enough. This is why the Samaritan movement exists. The Samaritan movement is grounded in a simple but powerful principle. No one should be left bleeding by the side of the road while others passed by. Inspired by the story of the Good Samaritan, this movement calls us to stop, to see, and to act, especially when it comes to the mental and emotional well-being of our children. We are a coalition of caregivers, professionals, faith-based and community partners committed to prevention, early intervention, trauma-informed care, and public education. Our focus is on building safe spaces where children can speak, be believed in, and be supported before crisis becomes catastrophe. Today's press conference is not about panic. Today's press conference is about responsibility. It is about naming this mental health crisis honestly, mobilizing collective action, and saying with one voice, our children's lives matter more than our discomfort, our stigma, or our silence. We cannot treat suicide and self-harm as isolated incidents. They are symptoms of deeper wounds. And those wounds demand coordinated, compassionate, and urgent responses. This morning, we are calling on parents, schools, policymakers, media, and communities to stand with us, to listen deliberately, to respond earlier, and to act boldly. Because every child we save is a future preserved. Thank you for being here, and thank you for choosing to stop, to see, and to care. We've put together a very esteemed panel here this morning. I'm going to give them the opportunity to share on their own experiences, what has been happening in their own work, in their own professions, from their own perspectives, from their own professional expertise, and to show that this is a cross-sectional issue that needs to be addressed ASAP. We are in a crisis mode, but it's not too late. We have the opportunity here to make a difference. I would like to now pass over to Isolde Ali-Gent, who will be sharing her perspectives as a clinical psychologist on what is happening.
Your Grace, members of the Samaritan movement, members of the media, ladies and gentlemen, good morning, and thank you for the invitation to speak. My name is Isolde Ali-Gent Garcia. I am a clinical psychologist who has been practicing in Trinidad and Tobago since 1997. I am US trained, and I've also had the opportunity to work in multiple US based clinics. So I'm just going to start with challenges related to mood, depression, suicidal ideation were present long before COVID. Since I started practicing going back, they're not new concerns in that sense, but what has changed, and I think this is the important point to note, is the pattern, is the intensity and the context in which we now practice and we're now seeing our families in crisis. Today, I am sharing my experiences from my clinical practice, but I should also say that I have also been involved with Childline since its inception 25 years ago. It's a long time ago. Your Grace. And Childline it's a helpline. It's a 24 helpline aimed at supporting children and their families. But being the chair and being the director and being the chair has also afforded me the opportunity to access anonymous trend data with regards to mental health issues and the needs of our families across the nation. So that has been an interesting journey as well, understanding, from all sectors of our nation. But what I want to address today, and just speak more so about the patterns that I've derived from my clinic, and what they reflect about suicidal ideation and self-harm amongst young people, as well as the opportunities that we have to intervene, especially at an early stage. So suicidal ideation did occur, but before it was typically embedded in longer-standing mood difficulties, ongoing environmental stressors within the family. In many cases, there was time and space to intervene early and support both the child and the family. But since the pandemic, and I think that it really was a game changer there, there's been not only an increase in suicidal ideation, I think we're all seeing that trend here, but an increase in threats, in the severity of planning, and the intensity of action, and that is very concerning. Impulsivity is much more, is exponentially stronger. And even though oftentimes when you unpack situations, it's not because somebody wants to die or wants to end their life. It's because the trap and the threat are that severe. So we're seeing suicidal thinking emerge earlier, and that's another trend that is quite concerning, escalate more rapidly and appear at a lower threshold for emotional overwhelm. Increased strain within homes has contributed to this shift. Lack of resources, financial pressures, reduced external supports, and this prolonged stress. This constant living in hypervigilance is very apparent. So many young people have been living and live in a state of hypervigilance where their nervous systems are trained to identify threat even when that threat is not there. What might be a this size problem actually feels like a this size problem, and therefore the reaction is this size. So part of the therapeutic work is being able to allow them to ground and have a sense of clarity, and to help families support that narrative and those strategies and interventions. So I was talking about my practice, and one of the, I think, huge changes I see many children struggling to socialize. Social language is foreign. A lot of it is scripted, and the expectations are scripted from media, which is very vastly different than what you actually see in real life, right? Mm-hmm. So they don't understand when they give a script and it's not met with the way it's supposed to look like on a TV show or a YouTube short. Apparently that's what they're watching now. And when it isn't, they're confused, and the rejection and the teasing, they just don't know how to respond or manage conflict. Many kids, not all, but many. And when social and academic demands increase and then tax that already overloaded central nervous system, we get increased reactivity with little opportunity for reflection, 0 to 100 immediately. And oftentimes the reaction is intense. So this has coincided, and I'm sure you've seen this as well, with a rise in bullying in schools, at the primary and secondary school, but I see in the workplace as well. So sometimes there's that trickle down, where you have that fear factor at work and then you have that fear factor at home because it's trickled down. So the intervention is really needed at all tiers, right? Educators are navigating academic catch-up, individual challenges, emotional needs simultaneously, and are often also under a significant strain. So the need to support our educators is critical, has always been critical, but even more so nowadays. So in my clinical work, we often describe these patterns in young people and family, and really society as a whole, as them being in worry brain mode. And what do I mean about that? Worry brain responses such as fight, flight, freeze, fawn, and flop are the other two that you don't really hear too much about, but they're very real, especially in the context of bullying. So when emotional or social demands exceed a young person's capacity, the behaviors, and this is very important to note, reflect survival and not opposition. So if you treat with it as if a child is being oppositional or behavioral at its surface, you run the risk of increased risk for suicide, for self-harm, or for increased reactivity. If trauma-based behaviors are addressed with correction alone, distress may escalate rather than resolve of the problem. And this is where the education is needed. So taken together, these patterns suggest that many young people are carrying loads that are exceeding their capacity, their social emotional capacity. And suicidal ideation in this context reflects overwhelm and a need for relief rather than the desire to die. And that is where we come in to intervene. The distinction matters because it means with early intervention and support for the structure, we can assist and we can help resolve this trending, distressing pattern. Red flags, I think that is important to note, would include a change in behaviors, rapid emotional escalation, withdrawal, irritability, conflicts with peers, changes in the way a child would engage at school, including decline in grades, expressions of hopelessness, or even apathy. I don't know, I don't care, doesn't bother me, where they just exist in a kind of situation, because when that's taxed, then the mood is at risk for dropping quickly. So we have many structures in place at a national level, including a 24-hour helpline and childline. But we do need a greater support structure, and collaboration is critical at this point. So I will just say, give you a little piece of information here from Childline, and the statistics show that between 2020 and 2025, 1,500 calls were made and messages related to self-harm and suicidal ideation. They were recorded by Childline, and most from young people aged 12 to 17. And that's just our interim statistics there. So what we need now are resources to assist in once distress has been identified, and this includes counseling services, family-based supports, school-based interventions, trauma-informed responses across all systems in our nation. The issue is to build the capacity to resolve from within and externally. So in closing, these observations are not about assigning blame, advancing any agenda, simply about listening carefully to what young people are communicating through their distress and responding early, thoughtfully, and humanely. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Isolda. Thank you for that contribution. And Isolda, I mean, what you have shared with us there is what we've been seeing with our own work with the Samaritan movement as well. As we go into schools, we're seeing problems socializing, we're seeing problems managing conflict, we're seeing issues with suicidal ideation. You said 1,500 calls, and out of that, the majority of them were from the ages 12 to 17, which shows that exactly what you are seeing is what the Samaritan movement is also seeing. In fact, all of our interventions thus far that we've had in the schools, 40% of the students who we did interventions with had some level of suicidal ideation or self-harm ideation, or were actively engaged in self-harming. And this is the crisis that we're talking about. So thank you so much for sharing your clinical perspective and what you're seeing on the ground. And as we mentioned in schools, I'd like to shift across to have that conversation around schools right now. That is a major area where the Samaritan movement does significant work, and we've been moving into the schools. But we wanted to bring a quality assurance manager from the Catholic Education Board of Management and a former principal as well, to share her perspective on what she's been seeing on the ground with regards to the impact on schools, families, and communities. So I'd like to hand over to Vanessa Yearwood.
So good morning, everyone. My name, as Darian said, I am Vanessa Yearwood, former teacher, principal with more than 30 years experience, and I'm currently a quality assurance manager with the Catholic Education Board of Management. I want to begin by saying our children are not okay. We look at them and we think that they are coping and that they are okay. They are not okay. I teach First Communion at my parish. And on Saturday, after class, a little girl came to me. She said, Miss Auntie, they call Auntie, Auntie, I need a hug. So I said, what happened? She said, Auntie, I just need a hug. And I stopped. I had something to do after, but I paused and I gave her a hug. And I said, what happened? She said, I am tired. She said, I feel so stressed. She's 11 years old, preparing for the SCA exam. So she said, there's so many practice test booklets, so much homework, I have to stay up late. She said, Auntie, I am tired. And that struck home to me because this is a little 11-year-old. So that one of the things that we are seeing in schools is that the whole onset of the self-harming, it is happening to children at a younger age. This was something that we thought was limited to the secondary school level, you know, bigger children, bigger boys and girls. But now we are seeing it happening at the primary school level, and that's frightening. Children take the little blade from the sharpener, you know, and under the desk they are cutting themselves. They take the pencil, sharpener a pencil, and try to inflict self-harm because for them it's a way of, you know, of coping with their difficulties, their mental difficulties. And poor things, they can't explain. At least this child was able to explain that she is tired, she is overwhelmed. But many of our children, they can't explain their emotions. So that one of the problems that I'm seeing in schools is happening at an earlier age. Another issue, before we would say that children who have behavioral problems, the high-risk children, those were the children who you would have expected to engage in self-harm and behaviors like that. But now it's happening among low-risk children, children who look okay, they come from stable families, mommy and daddy, they have the support at home, but our children are not okay, they're really not coping. So this is a crisis in our nation, and we really need to stop and pause and pay attention to what is happening. Social media. The children are, that's how they communicate, so there's no going back. You know, they're on their cell phones all the time. That's how they communicate with each other. But there's the algorithms. We know we call it social algorithms now because it's coming at them. The self-harm and all that, it's easy to spread. You know, sometimes it's easier to spread the negative than the positive. So that these are the things that they're spreading via social media. And they don't know how to cope. You have the copycat going on as well, that, okay, if I do this, it's going to help my state of mind. So yes, we're copycatting. Mary's cutting herself, and I'm going to try it as well. Children are also seeing their parents are on social media. Most of the time are not taking time to spend time with the children. So they feel all alone. They're suffering from loneliness. They're suffering from anxiety. They are overwhelmed. So many children, they have the exam pressure. We are an exam-driven society. So we want our children to do well, but we are not thinking about their mental health. You know, so I think we are really, I want to applaud the Samaritan movement, you know, for what they're doing, because we are really at a critical stage. And then too, in these schools, our teachers are not trained to deal with self-harm and, you know, so many behaviors they are not trained to address. So when it appears in the school, when they have to deal with it in the school, that's one trauma they're dealing with. And then we have the secondary trauma, because all the other children in the class, they are affected. The school family is affected, the home family is affected. So you have that ripple effect. So we really need to pause as a nation and take stock of what is happening with our children.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. That was Vanessa Yearwood, and I could see the passion in your eyes. I could see the pain in your eyes as well. And I thank you for coming here and for sharing that, because we share with that pain. When we go out there, when we're in the schools, when we're doing the interventions, we're seeing it firsthand, what you've been experiencing for the last how many ever years. So thank you so much for what you have done and for what you continue to do with your work with students. This reality is compounded. There are many issues that are facing us right now that is causing a lot of pain consistently, and that we really need to address as soon as possible. I think that now is not the time to drag our foot. We really need to start walking and moving with a pace and with a passion so that we can secure the future of Trinidad and Tobago. It is about what tomorrow holds. If we don't act today, then tomorrow is bleak. But today, we must make a difference. We must make those first steps forward. I want to actually welcome now Reverend Dr. Jared J. McGlone, who is a consultant to the Samaritan movement, and he's going to share the Samaritan movement's national response and what we're planning to do as we move forward.
Good morning, everybody, and welcome. Thank you so much to all of you for being here today and for hearing the real clarion call that has come from so many of your own children in regards to why we have gathered here on this day. I want to thank our esteemed panelists here, Solda and Vanessa, thank you, and your Grace, thank you. I would not be here if it were not for this man in the middle. About 12 years ago, we met in Rome and had just a chance conversation. And since that time, through your leadership, your grace, and through you really wanting to address so many of the issues of trauma that have existed here in Trinidad and Tobago, I was asked to come down where I'm a research fellow at Georgetown University in Washington, D.C. to assist in really, first of all, describing what levels of trauma exist, what types of trauma exist, and how do we best really have solutions come forward. I have just been utterly devastated as a clinician, as a psychologist. I've been utterly devastated as a priest and as a person when I go into your schools and I hear and see the level of pain and the level of hurt. I love Trinidad, and I've fallen in love with Trinidad. I need to let you know that your country's children are suffering at levels of pain and hurt I have rarely seen in my clinical practice. When we encountered students in our schools in which we have tried to produce trauma-informed teaching practices and trauma-informed self-care practices for teachers, the teachers, as Vanessa, as you said, are overwhelmed. The teachers want so much to provide resources, but they're poorly trained and poorly equipped. And the nature of the levels of abuse and neglect and violence that exist in these children's lives equally exist in the teachers' lives. And so there's a double effect going on that we need to address systemically. And that's the vision I hope to invite you into. That suicidality and the rates of suicidality are staggering. When 40% of your children are saying they're thinking about suicide, my God, people of God, we are in a crisis. This is astronomical numbers that have not been seen in any of the data. That it is validated by the work of Childline and Lifeline, that it is validated by objective data, means that we now need to speak openly and quite honestly about this immediate symptom of a bigger issue that is been described by Vanessa and Isolde and will be described by His Grace, that the system really needs addressing. We need heightened awareness with heightened prevention measures, with heightened cooperation between the private and public sectors. I believe so much in the fact that there's always hope in the midst of a crisis. There's always healing when we are dealing with such overwhelming statistics. What we have started in the Samaritan movement, which really sprang from the Ministry and Trauma Services here in the Archdiocese of Port of Spain, is attempting to move ourselves into becoming more trauma-informed, to really become more aware of the mental health first aid issues and suicide first aid issues, to become first responders to our children in need, most especially, and to our people in need. We view our work here in Trinidad and Tobago strategically, sustainably, and most especially, we see it systemically. In other words, that if we can address training teachers while also address helping parents, while also address students, while also being advocates for policy change, we believe that systemic vision, that systemic approach is needed now. The numbers are really quite overwhelming and staggering, and what we see on the ground is equally impactful. I only want to repeat that and repeat that and repeat that. I think in many ways what we're called to is really looking at ways that we can support each other at this time, but most especially know that we need all hands on deck, that this is a crisis. This is an emergency. I believe it's not only a national emergency in suicidality, but it is a national health emergency that we need to address at all levels of the health system. The mental health needs are overwhelming and the capacities are fairly limited. So we need to dream together in order to come up with solutions that will work. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Reverend Dr. McGlone. It is a health emergency. That is where we're at. This mental health reality is more than just mental health. It is a health emergency. And we've been responding. The Samaritan movement has begun taking steps in the direction of trying to bring different players together and getting them motivated and ready to move forward as we make a difference. That is what we are about. We are a hub for connecting all those different players, all those different partners, because only if we work together and we return to community can we truly make a difference. It is a return to community that we are looking at, a return to the connection, to the outreach that is so essential. When we began this press conference, we initially had His Grace listed to speak first, but he said, I need to listen and hear my people. And he has listened and he has heard, and he's ready to respond at this moment. And I know he's listened to so many people, so many young people as well across the Archdiocese who are calling out, who are in pain. And I would like to welcome His Grace Archbishop Charles Jason Gordon to give his remarks at this moment.
Thank you very much, Darian. Thanks to the Samaritan movement for doing the work that they're doing, for Childline TT, for doing the work that they're doing, for our education system, for the work that you are doing. Father Jerry said something interesting. Are we having a crisis with children and suicidality? Are we having a national health emergency? And I think that's a question that the policymakers need to look at and ask this as a frame for how we see this question. In 2013, Anderson Cooper did a documentary special on CNN, Being 13. And he had some academics looking at 150 13-year-old children and the social trends in those children. This is a decade ago. And what he saw frightened me when I looked at it. I showed it to 13-year-old children in Barbados, where I was at the time. They said, that's what we are living. I showed it to the parents, and the parents were in complete denial of what their children were experiencing. And so I deliberately showed it to the parents and had conversations, and the parents were in shock at what their children were living. Why he did that, that was the first generation of 13-year-olds who would have grown up with a cell phone. And it changed everything. In the Catholic Church, we do see, judge, act. We see, we've heard the data, judge, we've seen Father Jerry has given us a response and how we need to go in a particular way. But action, what do we do when we leave here? I want to have a call for action here. You know, we could talk about this forever, but we have to be candid and we have to be honest. There are some things we already know. We know that there is something about the cell phone and social media that has created sleeplessness, anxiety. It has created in our children a sense of identity crisis. They're not good enough. They don't get enough likes. A comparison that is on steroids. We know that. Now, we could argue with the data and the science ad nausea, but the public health officials in America and other countries have said there's sufficient here for us to start looking at policy. We didn't wait until we had conclusive evidence to put in seatbelts or to have a national warning about marijuana, about tobacco and its effects. Australia passed a law in December banning all social media platforms from allowing children onto their platforms. And I think that that's something that we have to really look at nationally. I want to commend the government of Trinidad and Tobago under the leadership of our Prime Minister, who has done a few things recently that really have piqued my interest. The discipline around driving, you might look at it as a harassment, making money, this or that. I see it as a very important lever for national building. We have become an indisciplined society. And that pushing that lever has forced all of us to come to discipline in a very different way. The second thing they did recently was introduce an age limit for gambling and for alcohol, and saying the children under 21 cannot do gambling or alcohol legally. And then putting a tax on alcohol for any adults who want. We're not stopping you, but you'll pay a premium price if you want to use alcohol because of its addictive nature. I will propose that social media is far more addictive than alcohol. In testimony in Congress, the giants and the leaders of tech said, we create the algorithm specifically to create long-lasting media exposure and engagement, and to bring the person back the next time and the next time and the next time. They've created it to be addictive. And I think following Australia, and many countries are looking at that now, we should be looking at a law to protect our children from social media the same way we're protecting them from alcohol. This country has another silent national emergency for children that nobody talks about. Pornography is a major national emergency for young boys in this country. I don't know if you all know, but the average teenage guy bumps into pornography, and 8, 9, and 10 is somewhere around where they're bumping into it. Their bodies aren't even ready to understand what is happening, and also their minds are not ready to understand this stimulation that is coming at them, and it's creating major havoc in the development of our children. Just like we're protecting our children from alcohol, I think we could protect them both from social media and also from pornography. How? During COVID, I had the privilege of sitting with the tech company CEOs in a forum that was created to talk about technology and what we should be doing in the country. And I said to them, we should be banning pornography. And I asked them, is it possible with the technology we have now? And they told me, yes, it is. That actually the technology companies who bring internet into the country can filter out pornography, violence, and adult content of that so that our children never have access to it. I am not talking about doing a censorship for the nation. I'm saying let's protect our children. Then we could do, like we did in alcohol, we could have a premium package of internet that you have to be age appropriate to sign into. You pay a premium price for access to it where you can access everything. But the children with their age can only access the normal package, which filters out the most difficult and the most terrible content. If we were to do that, we will reclaim childhood very quickly. Of course, I know. We will have a kickback in this nation like you can't believe. But it will only last about 3 to 6 months. Then everybody will settle down after that. The other thing I would like to propose as an action is we know the system is completely overwhelmed. We need at least 3 or 4 times the number of social workers in our schools. As of this morning, if that were possible. That's one of the great investments in national development that we can actually make. And by doing that, we would take the caseload down from those providers. Social workers right now are totally overwhelmed. We will give children access to caregiving, and we will also be able to give first responders a much quicker response time. Are these things possible? Absolutely. With the legislative framework of this government that has already gone in this direction with alcohol and gambling and driving, I think we could add pornography and social media. And I want to be clear. The penalty is not on the child or on the parent. The penalty is on the provider. And that's what Australia did, which I found fascinating. It's not that a parent will have a penal challenge if their child access. It is that the provider of the content will be censured and fined. And maybe even how the legislation goes, the penalty is on them to not provide it. If we accept that we have a national health emergency around children, I have the privilege and the responsibility of speaking to children from Charlottesville to the Caucasus, from Miaro to Carenage and beyond. And the story is the same everywhere I go. The loneliness, the isolation, the poor self-esteem, and with the boys, pornography. And their twisted conscience that doesn't know how to face or get past this. We can help our children. The role of adults is to create proper guardrails for their children. You will not send your 4-year-old child to cross the street by themselves. You will hold their hands and walk across the street with them. We have to put guardrails to help our children cross the digital highway and ensure that the digital highway is safe for them while they are crossing. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Grace. Very fitting to close us off on this panel. I think we'll move right away into the Q&A segment from the media. If there are any questions and from those present.
And we also just want to see if Dr. Hutchinson can join us from London. I haven't seen whether or not he's joined or not, but he was supposed to join us, so unfortunately he's not been able to. But just to let you know that. But thank you all to our esteemed panelists. Any questions from the press?
I noticed there's nobody from the Ministry of Education here. And there's a call for more in the schools. How will we address that?
So we've reached out and we're actively exploring partnerships with all the different ministries, and we have been pushing forward to look and see what are the best ways forward with regards to this. We are working directly with the schools, and we have gotten the support of the Ministry of Education. I think that's important to note. They've given us permission to go into various schools and to execute our programming, which is around trauma-informed practice and training teachers in trauma-informed practice. So they are aware of the work that we're doing, and we are actively building a relationship at this particular moment.
This is a very important question, and you may not know, but Vanessa here in our Catholic Education Board of Management, we have 25% of the primary school children in this country come to our schools. That's a large percentage. And the ministry and ourselves are partners in the education of children in this country, like all the denominational boards are. And it's something that we've already gone to the ministry, to the Minister of Education. I've already sent him the information from the Samaritan movement, and we already started a conversation about this information from the Samaritan movement. So it's a dialogue in progress.
Is there also a dialogue in progress with the Ministry of Health?
Not,
Yeah.
yes,
We
yes.
started one with the Ministry of Health last spring, in exactly in regards to that, and we're still ongoing conversations in that regard. So again, because we're very religious, so to speak, in regards to really abiding by good research protocols. So all the schools we've gone into, all 8 schools we've gone into, we've piloted what we intend to do. In other words, we want to make sure that what we do is safe, is effective, and will be sustainable. So in other words, we don't want to go in and have a one and done reality. So we want to build the relationships with the Ministry of Health, so that it's an ongoing program that is sustainable over years. And so those conversations and those relationships are happening, and we are exchanging our data in regards to what's going on and trying to find out what they're already doing. One of the key things I didn't want to make in coming down here was assuming that there was nothing being done here already. And so one of the first things His Grace and Darian and I did was we surveyed all 19 archdiocesan organizations to find out what they were already doing to serve the poor, to serve those who are traumatized. And the data is overwhelming. The level of trauma is overwhelming, but the level of engagement of all the ecclesial communities, all the commissions, is really doing great work. It's just that they're overwhelmed, much like the system is overwhelmed, as His Grace has pointed out, that we don't have enough social workers, for example. We don't have enough guidance counselors. And that's what they're telling us too. We've engaged with the guidance counselors. We've been in training with hundreds of guidance counselors. So again, building those relationships to really create a new infrastructure of change and support.
Just to support that is the purpose of this press conference. It's really to see how many more people we can bring on board, how many more partners we could get involved. Because somebody might hear this, somebody might see this, and they'll say, hey, we want to connect with you all. This is how we move forward with this. This is the programming that we're doing, and this programming connects with your programming as well. So that is our whole purpose of this press conference. It's about partnership.
Morning, everyone. Michelle Boy Express. I have a question for Father Bowman. If we might segue a bit, I wanted to ask you what are your thoughts on gaming on Sundays? Thank you, sir.
Not the purpose of our press conference, is it? Which is a separate matter. I'll talk to you about that after.
Taylor Jordan, Catholic News. So is it that the church is prepared to challenge government, policymakers publicly and persistently if there is no urgent response to this crisis?
It is that the church is ready to be, like every civil society organization, an active member of society and working with the government and policymakers to understand the nature of the challenge that we're facing and some ways forward that we can work together with to create safety for our children. And when you look at the legislative framework of this government so far, this is completely in alignment with where this government has taken us so far.
If I may respond to your question, I think the data is really important. And as a scientist, I think I always want to have the data before policymakers, before His Grace, before all the archdiocesan officials, in order to have policies and responses that are data-driven based on the facts on the ground. And I think that's why this press conference is so important, that when you see data coming from every aspect, from the clinical, from the schools, from our engagement, then we have absolute certainty that we do indeed, first of all, let's name it a national crisis. That's because what you say about it matters. And that's why we invited you here.
Neil from CNCT, do you all expect a pushback from this? Because an agency may say that is not factual to our point, right? Do you all expect, God forbid, a pushback in any sense, in a sense, from the society, certain cases?
So our project is, and all our programming is based off of research, and we have a team of international researchers who work with the Samaritan movement from across the globe, who are Trinidadian born but have studied in different universities across the entire globe. So everything that we do is data driven. So this is not just us coming and saying, oh, we just saw this alone, but also assessing, measuring, and using tools along those lines to ensure that what we are seeing is really lining up with what the data is presenting as well. So we are a research-driven organization, and we have no issue presenting our research at any point in time if asked. Transparency is a big part of what we are about.
Right, and part of the reason why I asked that question, my daughter had an experience, and I could talk from experience, but my daughter had an issue the other day. She's a lower 6 student, right? And she broke down in the car the other day. Sociology, I think she's doing this and that, right? And the teacher is like, you can't get through the teachers. Now, the child did not want me, the parent, to deal with the teacher, right? But the child is trying her best to fit in to deal with the subject, and late hours doing the work. And I am seeing that with my child, the trauma that the child is experiencing, right? And that's the reason why I asked for a pushback, because I am talking as a parent with a child, right? And the teacher might say different, right? And that is her style. But then you have a child who I could tell you is an A-class child and is totally traumatized in going to the class, to do the class. And I know what she wants to do in life, what you are doing.
So I know today is about the Samaritan movement, but I would be happy to speak with you on this afterwards to help support you and your child. In terms of policy, because from what I'm seeing, there are two questions here. There's individual situations where an overloaded system is being taxed even more with miscommunication and ego in there, and we need ego, but it shouldn't be driving us. So there's the individual situations where we have those challenges, and then of course we have policy and pushback there. So to your point, and I think this is what I was talking about a little bit earlier on, we have systems that are already taxed. And they were before COVID. SEA was very difficult. CAPE, very difficult. These are very difficult exams. So we would expect that there would be some sort of level of challenge and of stress and of anxiety. But then throughout the years, so your daughter is lower 6, she would have gone through the pandemic, primary school, taken SEA during that time. So just that alone, huge, and would have affected. And then we have then this cohort of kiddos coming into their secondary schools, and the teachers themselves were trying to figure out and navigate what that was. So primary into secondary school, so the system itself. So then I guess my question would be, why is this happening? I don't want to detract away from Samaritan movement here, but I'm certainly happy to chat with you on this and see if I could get you some.
I spoke to Mike from my experience that it was
A general, but I don't think it's a detraction,
Yeah.
because we have to deal with the child. You ask me if I expect pushback. I ask you which country we're living in. Just tell me which nation we're talking to. Is there anything in Trinidad and Tobago that ever goes out for policy, for good, for moving people forward, and you don't get serious pushback? That's the nature of it. That's first. Second, you ever tried to discipline your child by banning them from social media for a day? One day. Any of you ever tried that? What you get? What kind of pushback? Addiction level pushback. It's like a withdrawal that you're getting, which says to us already what we already know. It is addictive. And I'm not saying take the device away. I'm saying take the most destructive things on that device away from that child. This is a digital highway. You can't send the children there to play in the traffic. We have to make it safe for them.
I want to go back to Darian's point, which is that all of the drive here is data driven. It's empirical fact. So even though there will always be those who will argue for and against and so on, it is, once you come from a place of transparency, of fact, of where you can show your methods and where you get your sources from, it would be more difficult than to argue with the validity of what we're saying here. And I think, at least in my experience, I believe that there are multiple stakeholders that are aligned with what we're thinking. So yes, while there would be pushback, I think there'll be a lot of support as well, and I have faith in that.
I want to echo that point and answer your question concretely. One of the things we've done is we've attempted to partner with all of the other mental health agencies and departments to really find out, okay, this is what we're seeing, what are you seeing? And so to me, your point is really well taken in the sense that we will always see pushback when we are sort of raising awareness in order to have good prevention. Suicidality in any culture is a stigma associated with it, just like any mental health issue has a stigma associated with it. Where is that stigma in your own family, in yourself, and in your nation? And how then can we have programs that do two things? I want to come back to the basics of what we're really talking about. We see an urgent need to raise awareness and an urgent need for prevention of the most obvious symptom of, I think, what is Grace has really captured here, that it is a both-and situation. You already had an existing high level of trauma on the landscape, and now it's accentuated by everything that, as Grace has pointed out. That both-and reality necessitates us providing concrete solutions in partnership and in collaboration with those, and in dialogue always. The Synodal Church is a listening church, and that's our basic framework for what we do in the Samaritan movement. We never go in and come up with solutions. We ask you, what are you seeing? We ask you, what do you need with what you're seeing? And we ask you concretely, what do you see as the solutions? So that these are culturally sensitive and data-driven realities. I want to end with, just what Eli Wiesel said to that, and he, again, was a survivor of the Holocaust, that he said, sometimes hope is a gift from God, but most especially hope is a gift we give to one another. And at this time, that's the gift that I hope we give one another.
On that note, I would like to say that the Samaritan movement, the message that we've had is a return to community. We don't expect to be the only agency doing all the work or every single thing. What we wanted to be here were catalysts, just to get the ball rolling, and for other agencies, for other groups, for other sects, for other areas, for other people to take this up and to get moving and to get the ball rolling. It cannot be us alone. It has to be a community. And we picked that imagery specifically, a return to community, because in all aspects of our society, of what we're seeing now, that is what we're lacking, and that is what we need. We need that return to community. You sit and you listen to people share stories about 20 years ago where they knew their neighbors on their street. Now, so many people would move into new areas, they move into different areas, and even in their own spaces when new people have come in, they don't know the person living next to them. And that lack of community is what is causing a lot of suffering for us here in our country. The segregation, the separation, and the polarization is leading us down a very dark path. So for us, we see that idea of partnership, of bringing people together, of bringing different agencies together, as us returning to community. For only then can we truly help and assist the children of our nation. We are in crisis mode at this moment, but the good news is that in every crisis, there's significant hope. And that's why I want to leave you all today, that this press conference is a press conference built on hope. And we're moving forward in a direction to make a difference. I thank you so much for joining us here. Thank you to the panel, and thank you especially to the media.
Thank you for your questions. Thank you. Thank you.
Off the record, as a teacher myself, I want to tell you, you need to go in and speak to your daughter's teacher.
Yes.
Absolutely.
You
Because
do.
your daughter's mental health is at risk.
Yes.
And